Right, guys, welcome back to another edition of the Chiefs Talk YouTube channel. And here we are, 0-2 to start the season. We lost the Super Bowl 59 rematch to the Philadelphia Eagles. We're winless, but coming out of that game, it's not as bad as what a lot of us thought it would be. I gave a lot of positives that we could take into the game last week. And, throughout the week, the analysts were saying we were going to get smashed. Our own fans were saying we were going to get smashed. It's going to be like the Super Bowl. We've got, without our two-star receivers, the defense looked awful against the Chargers. We've got no chance. And we actually put up a valiant effort. We did fight. We ran them close. And really, it came down to what we talk about all the time, those fine margins in the game that help good teams win and get over the line. And the fine margin this time was, the Travis Kelce drop into the end zone, which turned into an interception. I won't delve on this too long, and I really do hate to dig into players, but that's 2 weeks in a row now where Kelsey's had the ball more or less in his hands um, for a touchdown, and he's dropped it or it's been intercepted or whatever's happened. Very uncharacteristic. It's not good. He's not washed. You know, he's been asked more of himself because we're without Worthy, we're without Rice, but 9 out of 10 times he's taken that in for a touchdown. And look, the team know that the red zone needs to get better. He knows he needs to be better. We don't need to spend too much time telling a guy like that he needs to do better, and he will do better. He will improve. They'll get it together. Um, and you think back to the other thing that stands out to me from that game of fine margins is the Butker missed field goal. But in all honesty, I think none of us are within our rights to say anything about Harrison Butker, considering all of the times he's bailed us out over the years. I can count so many times he's helped us win a game with a field goal. He's even the scores up for, Pat to have another go down the line and win the game for us. He's done this, he's done that, walk off field goals. And the thing is with Butker is, yeah, he missed the PAT in the first week. He's missed a field goal. It's 59 yards. When he gets into that, he gets out of his groove, he always fixes it. People, they haven't entered the panic yet. Not from what I've seen. But when they do, he normally pulls out the bag and it's all good. So there's nothing really to worry about there. It's just one of those. But it really just comes down to those fine margins of if you make these plays, you score these touchdowns and field goals, we're basically running the Eagles down to the final minute. We're pushing them, we're neck and neck with them. And the Eagles at the moment strike me as a team, they're not playing great, but they're doing what we used to do all the time, and that's just win with them fine margins, get everything done right, and fair play to them. They left our head with the win. But for us, there's positives to take out of that game, and there is still some negatives. So I reckon I'll start with the negatives. The one thing that everyone I think assumes going to be coming is the running game. The running game is just against the Eagles, it was just non-existent unless your name is Patrick Mahomes. Patrick's turned into a running back one for the Chiefs. He is the leading rusher for the team over 2 games. It's only 2 games. He's a leading touchdown scorer. I think he has, top of my head, 123 rushing yards over 2 games, which is crazy. He has more rushing yards than Jahmyr Gibbs. So, he's leading all quarterbacks in rushing yards. The likes of Allen, Lamar, Jaden Daniels, Justin Fields will, inevitably catch him up. But, I posted these this week as like you have to post them when it's like this because it's kind of like it's an unheard thing, and everyone's like, "This is not a good stat," and I'm like, "Well, it's a nice stat for him, but yes, it's not a good stat for the team. It's not going to last forever. It's not sustainable. The Chiefs aren't built and cannot be built on Patrick Mahomes taking off when the play breaks down and keep doing that because when you're I'm not saying he's incapable of it because he's excellent. He can truck people. He's a big guy. He's not a Kyler Murray built guy that's going to get wrecked by a defense. But it's scary for us because he is, the franchise player. He is the, QB1. It just won't work. He needs to have a run game established. He needs the help. He needs the help. The team needs help, but he really needs the help. He needs to take the pressure off him. He needs to not be relied on like that all the time. And it's great to see him do it, but ultimately, the team needs to be balanced. It needs to be running backs. They need to be making plays. I think Pacheco against the Eagles had 2.2 yards per carry amongst all his carries, which is just really not acceptable. And what does that come down to? You know, it's open for debate. It's either Pacheco himself, you know, is he just not kicking on? Is he just, showing what a seventh round draft pick is? Is is it the coaching? The coaching's been called out this week. Is it the O-line coaching? Is it the running backs coach? Is it Andy Reid himself who just wants to pass the ball? Is it the offensive staff that's not drawing up these running plays? Are the line not blocking properly? You know, I look at I've seen various clips over the last couple of weeks. There was one in the first week, and we all know Pacheco, his vision isn't his strongest point. Nowhere near. He lacks vision. But what he has in burst and speed and aggression, he doesn't have that vision to him. I've seen Josh Simmons last week. He opened up a big, he's basically like Pacheco could have followed him into the end zone. It was that easy, and Pacheco just didn't see it. And then this week, I believe Freed had one block. Just running, steaming forward, and Pacheco just didn't see it. And they're two clear cut. One's a touchdown against the Chargers, and one's a huge gain. And there we are, 2.2 yards per carry. But then I look sometimes at the line, and I think they're not exactly the greatest run blockers. There's gaps, but there's not holes that they're creating for people to run through. If you ever look at Kareem Hunt, he fights for his yards. Even when you're going into the end zone, don't get me wrong, the O line get him into the end zone, or the tight ends, whoever's there, they'll shove him in. But he's really grinding for them 3 or 4 yards sometimes to get into the end zone and score them touchdowns. Or whatever he's doing. He had some plays this week where he's grinding, but it's never a clear cut. Oh, I'm just going to run into that gap. Here's this lovely hole for me to run into. And it brings me to like something that I watched in the Texans game where a lot of people have said Nick Chubb is washed, for example. And the Texans O line created a fantastic hole for him this week for a touchdown. And I just thought, wow, do we rarely ever see the Chiefs do that for our running backs? It's a rarity. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but it's a rarity. And, the running back room for me, the whole play. It's a concern. It's like, where do you go with this? If Pacheco is the problem, do you start limiting the snaps even further? I don't think he had that many carries against the Eagles, but they didn't run the ball much. Do you start giving Brashad Smith, the rookie, a chance? He's a fantastic receiving back because he was converted wide receiver. But is it time to give him a shot? This is how it started with Pacheco. He came in as a 7th round pick, says he's going to take a grown man's job. Is that now time for Brashad Smith to do that? If it gets worse, do they hit the panic button and trade for someone? If I was thinking of trade candidates off the top of my head, if we were being irrational right now, I'd say I think Travis Etienne is off the board. I think they traded Tanks Bigsby Jacksonville to the Eagles, and Etienne's had two back-to-back really good weeks. So I can't see him being traded out of Jacksonville. Two guys that stand out to me are Breece Hall at the Jets because I think he's has a contract year upcoming, but the Jets just don't look good at all. And it's like the Chiefs could potentially save him from the Jets. And he would work wonders in the Chiefs offense. He really would. He's a different caliber of player. And even if you don't want to give him that contract next season or whenever it's due, at least you get the use out of him this year. And then another guy is Kansas City's own Rashad White of the Tampa Bay Bucks. So, hometown kid. He's kind of fallen behind in the pecking order to Bucky Irving. He did score the winning touchdown though for the Bucks. So are they trying to go that route with them like the Lions have with Gibbs and David Montgomery, where it's a 1-2 punch, or are they open to trading Rashad White? And I do know that if he was traded, he would love to come back to Kansas City. I mean, who wouldn't? But that is an actual fact. That is where he'd like to go. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. If it does happen, they might they might fix the run game. They might fix, they might start drawing up a load of plays, and there you go. We have an established run game. And to be honest, against the Giants this Sunday, I think if the run game is to improve, it's got to be against the Giants. I think they're susceptible against the run. I think if we see another poor display from the running backs, there's more questions to be asked. So yeah, fingers crossed we're not watching on Sunday night and Mahomes is scrambling around and gaining more yards and still leading Jameer Gibbs in week 3 in rushing yards in the league. And another point I would really like to touch on, which I don't think's really been brought that much, but it's something that's caught my eye over the last 2 games, and that is the tight ends. And it's not Travis Kelce. It is, where is Noah Gray? He signed this deal with us last season. He got extended. He had a decent season last season. He'd come on a lot. He had a good camp, and it's like, well, Noah Gray's going to take that next step now. Solid tight end too. I always think at one point I was calling him the best tight end two in the league. Based on, I remember there's a period, if you guys remember, where Mahomes was going to him non-stop for a couple of weeks. If you played fantasy football and you had Noah Gray, you're absolutely laughing. He's never going to be the next Travis Kelce, who is, So this so far this season, we've rarely seen him. I think against the Eagles, he had 1 catch for 1 yard off the top of my head. Where is this guy? You paid him the money. Why aren't you playing him? And I think they've run certain personnels which have devoid him of the game, or he's blocking. But when you think about you're down 2 star receivers and you need guys to catch balls, yes, you look to Kelce, of course. He's the most trusted target. Yes, you got Juju. Yes, you have Hollywood Brown, who had a good week 1. Yes, you have Tyquan Thornton, who is the deep ball specialist. But Noah Gray, where is he? Why don't they factor him into these plays? Especially in the end zone. Where is his roots? You look at other teams. I just think this. You look at other teams; they're always managing to factor in their tight end twos and even tight end threes sometimes. Which brings me on to Bobby Tonyan. In the preseason and camp, he had a fantastic camp. I don't think many people had many expectations for him going into camp, and he had this great camp. He had a fantastic preseason. He hurdled a guy against the Seahawks, and people were clamoring for him clamoring for the Chiefs to take him out of the game in one of the preseason games. Get him off. Everyone was saying, reporters were saying, fans were saying, get him off the field. He's made the roster. He's tight end free. Forget Jared Wiley, the rookie from last year. This is the guy. We haven't even seen him. Yes, I know it's a regular season and things change. And, Bobby Tonyan's not going to start ripping up and get 500, 600 yards as a tight end free. But when you're devoid of ideas on offense, which it looked like against the Eagles in parts, why don't you throw him in there? He's a target. He can catch the ball. He can make plays, just like Noah Gray. I'd like to see more of them against the Giants. I really would. I'm sure the staff know this, but it's about putting it into practice. And then as far as receivers go, Thornton was, deep ball, touchdown, exactly what he's there to do. Exactly what those of us who knew would happen. Mahomes, I'd say it's unforgivable. They missed him on that one before. I was saying last week they really need to target Adoree Jackson. He's a weak link for the Eagles secondary, and the one where Mahomes missed Thornton by a mile, Adoree Jackson ran to his own player. So there you go. If they'd have gone that route more, we might have seen even more. But thankfully they did connect, and it's a good bit of optimism for the duo, because when you do get Royals, when you do get Worthy, when you do get Rice back, Thornton's still going to be that deep threat that is going to expose secondaries when they're too busy worrying about Rice, Worthy, Royals, Kelce, Juju. You got to worry about this guy steaming down the field, and he creates yards of separation. For years, Chiefs fans have been saying the receiver room can't create separation. This guy does it every single play. In camp, he was doing it. Well, camp's one thing, preseason's another. Regular season is a whole different beast, and he's done it every single step of the way. He will get separation on cornerbacks. So you have to target him. You have to, if you're asking me for the Giants, what I'd love to see them come out of the gate. None of this 4 yard check down stuff to Kelsey and Juju. Let's just go for it. Let's put it on the Giants straight away and let's get Thornton down there and just throw a bomb to him. Because he's going to catch the ball. He's going to get, he's going to get opportunities. So I want to see that. When you talk about positives from the Eagles game, we have to talk about the defense. The defense was far more improved than the Chargers game. We left the Chargers game thinking we're cooked. Spags has lost it. Some of these opinions on Twitter after that game. We're finished. We've got no run stopper. We've got, the corner room is absolutely toast. The secondary room is absolutely toast. I do think we still need a veteran guy in the secondary, in the safety room. But the cornerback room is fine, in my opinion. We lost Christian Fulton this week, and I don't think he's going to suit up against the Giants, which is a concern when you spent a lot of money on the cornerback. But Jalen Watson had a fantastic game. Noel Williams had a fantastic game. Let's get that guy on the field as much as possible. Let's see what he's got. We saw what he's got. He was making big plays against the likes of Devontae Smith. He actually posted a picture of him standing over an Eagles player on his IG. So we know we've got a dog in that room. We've got another Jaden Hicks who's up for the challenge. And Patrick said in this press conference last week, who's up for the challenge? And there's a guy straight away. I'm not worried about the corner room. Yeah, Trent gave up the big play to Devontae Smith, but the ball was kind of, when you watch it back at the time, you're like, oh wow, it's awful. But when you watch it back, the ball just hung in the air for ages, and them ones can be hard to track sometimes. I know Devontae came down with it, but ultimately it's like you go one way, you think the ball's coming, and actually it's hanging, it's slower, and you just miss it. And Trent will want that one back, but he is CB1. It's a rare, sort of miss for him. It's not really a concern. Another guy I have to shout out is Omar Norman Lott. Finally made his debut for the Chiefs after, I wouldn't say a turbulent preseason, but I'd say an up and down preseason where it seemed like they were trying to turn him into a nose tackle. They put too much weight on him. He got an ankle injury. He never really shook it off by the time preseason came around. We all got him out there, and he was back to what it seems being what he is, a rotational DT, as he was at Tennessee. I wouldn't even say he sacked Jalen Hurts. I'd say he clotheslined him, as they say in wrestling. He absolutely smoked him. It was amazing to see. It got the crowd hyped. He was hyped. That's what you want from a guy who's coming to his first ever game for playing for the Chiefs, is to come out and make an impression like that. I'd love to see more of him. Maybe that's the kickstart that the line need, because again, we're getting pressures, but we're not getting sacks apart from that one. We're not. Jones is obviously getting double teamed. It's a fantastic Eagles O line, but where are Charles Omenihu? Where is George Karlaftis? George has been paid a ton of money. We need to see some production. And Charles, he's in a contract year. Whether he gets paid by the Chiefs or he goes elsewhere, which is more likely, he needs to put some work in if he wants to get paid next season. So we need to see a lot more from the line. We really do. That is, I'd say it's a mild concern if it carries on. Like, the one game I do really expect to see them take a leap is against the Giants, because the Giants O-line's a bit sus at the moment. Andrew Thomas has been out for a couple of games. I think he's been practicing this week. They're the tackle. But he probably won't be 100%. And the line itself, I think against the Cowboys, I think the offense had over, if I'm correct, they had 100 yards and penalties, which is insane. We moan about John Taylor. He gets one flag and it's the end of the world for us. Never mind the 4 last week. But the Giants line is susceptible to flags, and there's a bit of instability there. So I think if you're Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, Charles Omenihu, I don't think Mike Danner's going to make it. He hasn't practiced. So you look at those guys and you think, go out and make a statement, guys. Let's gain some confidence. Omar Norman Lott, let's get him out there again. So yeah, it's a positive to take for the defense. We only shipped 20 points to the Eagles, who put 40 up on us in the Super Bowl. So it's a marked improvement. It's a marked improvement from the Chargers game. They have to kick on with that to keep it tight. Spags. In Spags we trust. You have to trust the guy. He always gets it together. And he'll be up for the Giants game as his former team. He'll be up for that. Um, and also an interesting fact, I don't think it's either in the Mahomes era or it's in the Reid era or one of these. The Chiefs have never beat the Giants in MetLife Stadium, which is a crazy stat when you think of it. I mean, I know we don't play them every season, which is kind of funny, but stats are there meant to be broken. So let's go in there and put a display on. And the good news is heading into that game that Worthy is back to practice as he was, the tail end of last week, but he was never making the Eagles game. It was too much of a risk. He's actually been limited participant, I think, for 2 days. Andy Reid said there was no limitations, but I think that was like maybe a mix up in reporting from Chiefs media because he was definitely limited today. But Jalen Rose is back also. Jalen Rose, who everyone was kind of getting worried about, knee tendonitis. It's really not a simple injury. You have to manage it. You have to, stabilize your muscles. You have to build. You have to strengthen them. Could have been a long-term injury. They're still going to be. He's going to be on a snap count 100%. I'm not saying he's going to be mildly snapped, but he's going to be on a count. But to have him as a full participant in practice today is great. It's great for the Chiefs. That's what you want. You want them guys. Help is on the way. As I posted, help is on the way. Rice, Royals, Worthy, they'll all be back by at worst week 7, which is when Rice is due back. I expect Worthy will make this Sunday. I think he'll be severely limited on the snap count. I can't imagine him being the deep shot guy down the field, taking all these, snaps. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's great, but if he's limited today, and that time of this is Thursday, so we've got another day of practice. I just think he's going to be limited, which is fine. Ease him back into it because what you don't want to do is throw him in there and he gets injured again. Then you've got the Ravens coming to our head the week after the Giants. You just don't want that. So the positives are there for the offense. The defense has got it together. Patrick does need help. He needs more help in the running game. The staff just need to get the running game going. They need to figure some out, whether that's with the personnel they've got, whether it's fixing the line, or whether it's making the trade eventually, or trying something different with Brashad Smith. He'll have his whole receiving core back, which people say, oh, it's not that big of a deal, but it's a huge deal. I'm not saying the likes of Hollywood and Thornton and Juju and Kelsey can't, make it happen because they've been playing well, but you have guys like Rice and Worthy come back and the whole game plan changes. Worthy was obviously the game planned receiver this season until Rice was back. Rice was last season. You see how that transpired for the offense. The offense will change. It will change. You have all them guys out there, and defenses aren't going to know what to do with these guys. So, I fully expect us to go into New York, get that win. I'm not saying we're going to hang up 30 or 40 on these guys. Rush dropped, 37 last week against the Cowboys? We have to be shored up. We have to be aggressive. We can't take them lightly. We have to go out there and win. Look, I'm not saying this in a humorous way. I'd take a field goal win at this point of the season. I just want to get us to win. I think if we get a win, the momentum starts then. The Chiefs get going. We get some momentum going to that Ravens game. We've got a tough stretch. We've got the Ravens. We've got to play the Commanders. We've got to play the Lions. It's tough, but they're winnable games. We have to remember we're the Kansas City Chiefs. We just made the Super Bowl. We won back-to-back Super Bowls. We could have had a historic three-peat. The team's not suddenly finished overnight. It's just started slow. And we're still going to be there at the end of the season. So hang in there. And let's kick on. Let's get this win on Sunday. Let's make a statement. Let's get back to what we do best, and that's winning.